All About Beer receives underwriting support from 49th State Brewing. They understand the importance of independent journalism in the beer space, and their support helps fund original work. Learn how you can affordably support journalists by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl, and this week we say goodbye to Trve Brewing, one of the great success stories of the early 2010s that captured headlines and fans thanks to its musical bent and welcoming approach. It closed both its original Denver location and its newer Asheville, North Carolina location last week. Founder Nick Nunns is here to share the history, reasoning, and his forward vision. But first, keep up with the events we have going on and more by hanging out with our social media. We're at All About Beer across all the major platforms. And if you have comments, guest suggestions, or just want to reach out, you can always reach me at johnhall@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of email, if you go to our website, you can sign up for our newsletter, and that's one of the best ways to get all we're producing right to your eyeballs. We're also supported by you. Head to allaboutbeer.com/support and learn how just a few bucks can have a huge impact in supporting original journalism in the beer space. On that note, thanks to this episode's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Stomp Stickers. Stomp is built for the business community, serving everyone from small independents to larger franchises. Whether you need low minimums for a limited batch or bulk pricing for your go-to products, they've got you covered. Join thousands of breweries that trust Stomp for their custom printing needs. Go to stompstickers.com and try them out and score 15% off of your first order with the code FIRSTRUN.
Calling all hopheads. Dogfish Head's 60-minute IPA is a fantastically hoppy India Pale Ale that's beautifully balanced thanks to their unique continual hopping method. Delivering a pungent hop flavor that isn't crushingly bitter, 60 Minute is continually hopped throughout the boil for a full 60 minutes. Starting to see where the name comes from? Check out dogfish.com to learn more and to find some 60 Minute near you. Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, Milton, Delaware. Please drink responsibly.
If you're running a brewery, owner or operator, Beer 30 by the Fifth Ingredient is the ultimate command center. The most powerful brewery management software on the market, Beer 30 handles the entire brewing workflow from recipe development to production. Once your beer is brewed and ready, it seamlessly manages your inventory and streamlines your brewery's sales and distribution, all in the same easy-to-use platform. Beer 30 lets you get back to the beer and to the people that made you fall in love with this industry in the first place. And no other brewery management software gives you the ability to truly master your business and get the insights that you need to thrive in an increasingly competitive industry. Visit thefifthingredient.com/allaboutbeer today to learn more and receive 3 free months of Beer 30. A few weeks back on social media, Trve Brewing posted that it was headed into its final weeks of operations. Nick Nunns, the founder, laid out the reasons in the post. There's heartbreak for those who walk through the doors of the brewery, especially the original Denver location. Trve Brewing, spelled with a V, was often better known as the heavy metal brewery. Inside the bar, the decor was not an homage, but the embodiment of metal music. And while some might have been intimidated by it, they never needed to be. It was one of the most welcoming breweries going. It served as a case study for some, and its influence to the overall rise of craft beer 15 years ago will never be denied. Nunns joined me from North Carolina, where he opened a second location with a similar hope. We recorded it just a few days before the last call. Here's our conversation. When you put up this Instagram post a couple of days ago, I was really kind of struck by one, my memories of the brewery, and all the conversations we've had over the years, and just what Trve was, and I think continues to be, for so many people. And this Instagram post that you put up, the social media post, you laid a lot of it bare, and you cite a mediocre business plan, no professional brewing experience, and way less money than you needed at the time, which I love that honesty, because, there's that joke that's going around these days of every brewery is, 2 home brewers who had a dream. And then you kind of go in a little bit deeper and it's like, oh, there's a lot of trust funds involved and things like that. So, um, take me back to those early
Or
days
I think
of,
honestly, more often than not, what you have is a what I have found in my experience, and all the credit is due to these individuals, but you have a partner who's actually the breadwinner of the house, who's helping some person who's misguided and thinking about opening a brewery and supporting their household. So I know a lot of spouses who are the real breadwinners and are enabling a lot of folks to pursue this career, I guess.
yeah. So that was you early on?
No, no, I was
Okay.
actually an exception to that. Erin, my wife, certainly, she worked in the business. We met through beer. She moved to Colorado with the intention of running she was doing consulting work. And then, after a certain point, there was a lot of skills that she had that we needed at the time. And I think a lot of the credit for how well we kind of operated towards the end is all due to her. I mean, she gave us SOPs, she made us have meetings, she made us have structured meetings. She worked with a lot of our staff to make sure they understood what the give and the take of employment at True Brewing was all about. In terms of like what our expectations are and what our employees could expect from us. And she did so much work to just really make us just operate a lot more professionally. And if not for that, I think we definitely would not have made it through the pandemic if not for a lot of her guidance, and strategic thinking and all the rest of it. So I have to give her, just at the beginning of this conversation, just the biggest shout out, and just profess my absolute undying love for her and helping us try to, keep this thing afloat for as long as she did, and the patience she exhibited in doing so. So,
I like that.
yeah.
I mean, so where does that mediocre business plan that you cite in this, where in this post, where does that fit into everything you just said?
So the mediocre business plan really was, I had no industry experience. I didn't know how breweries operated. I didn't know anything about, the nuances of, professional brewing production, staying on timelines, procurement, anything, HR related issues, like none of these things really were at the forefront of my thinking in running this business, and or at least in opening the business. It was just such a, I think I look back at the business plan that I had actually written, and it was all of maybe like 5 to 10 pages, with the pro formas included, so it just, in that way, it was just kind of like it was a half baked, in knowing what I know now in terms of like how business plans can write, and the ones that I did write in terms of like expanding to Asheville, I fleshed out such a significantly more robust plan in terms of that looking back at the original plan for, the original business plan that I wrote out is just like, it's such a joke.
So, I mean, with all of that, with you talking about those early days then, and the little experience running things, I mean, why did you open in the first place? What was the driving force behind you creating this and bringing it to life?
I think it was just a belief that I could, I think it was a naive sort of like belief of just thinking like, well, I have an idea and I think it's a good one. And I was sick of my desk job at the time. So I was just looking, I was young, I was 28 years old, thinking back at how much, life changes between 41 now and 28 then.
Yeah.
It's a pretty significant, a lot of life happens in that time frame. And a lot of
Yes.
life did happen for me in that time frame that I'm immensely thankful for. So I think, yeah, I don't. I think I just thought I had a novel idea. People were telling me that I was homebrewing decent beer. A lot of chatter was happening out there. That was 2011, 2012. There were a couple of new breweries that were coming up on the scene in Denver, and I just thought, I think I can do this too. I just had a belief in myself that it was something that I could bring to the world, and I did. And I'm just so immensely proud of how long it lasted, and reading through the Instagram comments and on the social posts and everything, I've been absolutely floored. I didn't realize, like how much of an impact this thing made on people of all walks, between people saying they met their partners because of True, the network of friends that exists in Denver, of some of our best regulars who have all become best friends of each other, that all of that stuff. And then a lot of people in the industry as well, just saying, we were so inspired by what you were doing because it was just so authentic and so original and just so truly just being itself that, we felt we had, it laid groundwork is what a lot of people have said to me. It paved the way for like these left of center breweries to exist in a lot of ways.
So I'm glad you brought that up because, I think in the beginning, and I remember writing about you all, at the start and having conversations with you and everything else like that, it was easy to just say, oh, this is the heavy metal brewery. And I know you all leaned into that, and I know that was sort of the thing. But as I've been thinking about this conversation and thinking about and going back to some of those early articles, it was at the beginning of that growth period of craft beer, independent beer, whatever in America. And a lot of breweries were opening up. And there was this sort of, and I think still is, this cookie cutter kind of, well, we're going to have a nice welcoming tap room. We're going to have a, diverse tap list. And, it's going to be a place that, families want to hang out or, people want to go after work or et cetera, et cetera. But having the theme behind it, what you just called left of center, um, was novel and still kind of is because there aren't a lot of breweries that have an identity outside of we're a brewery. They might have great branding, but
Mhm.
there's not always this is who we are. This is what we want this to be. And that to me has always been sort of the charm of you all, of knowing what you wanted it to be and then sticking with it.
Yeah,
And
I think
yeah,
that authenticity is the word that gets thrown around a lot, and I agree with that. I think it's that, we never, we had very specific hiring practices. We
like what?
brought people into the, just like literally part of our application process would be like, especially for like bartenders or people who are like forward facing and really representing the brand to our guests that were coming in the tap room. One of our application questions was, what are the first three albums you're going to play on your shift? And
Oh
that
shit.
weirdly enough is like that. And on top of that, we never took resumes. One of my favorite hire things that I implemented as far as a hiring practice was, we don't take resumes. Just write us a letter. Just write us an application letter, because not that opens up so much between the question about the music and the question about writing us a letter. You learn an immense amount from this applicant in terms of like, is the music that you're going to be playing in line with kind of what our vision is for the vibe of the tap room. So if somebody came in with an application and said, like, I want to play Five Finger Death Punch and Lamb of God, it's kind of a big throw off where it's like, yeah, that's metal, but that's not the metal that we are looking for in terms of the vibe that we're trying to establish in our tap room. And then from the letter itself, you get this a bit, you see through it and you see, why is this important to them? Why is this job important to them? What is their communication style? What is their communication ability? Are they able to communicate at all? We would get like 2 sentence application letters, and it's like, well, you obviously didn't get the brief. Like, we wanted to learn about you. You didn't take the time to actually do that. So it was just such a really excellent application process that we had established that ensured that the people that I was lucky enough to employ were on board and understood the mission. They were just like the right candidates for the job, um, because we learned so much about them from that application process.
Hmm. Um, when you think about the vibe that you set and the way that you were able to speak to drinkers, consumers that sought you out because of that vibe, have you been surprised that more breweries didn't find their own niche, their own path, their own sort of same level of commitment that you did?
Am I surprised by that?
Yeah.
I am not.
Because you showed that it worked.
Yeah, I don't think I am because I think that what we did is immensely not safe, right? Like it is not the safe business play, you know.
Okay.
We're very lucky to have been going 13 years and have had a really great trajectory. And I think that, that's a multivariate reason as to why that has lasted as long as it has. But I think the smart and safe business play is to appeal to a much broader audience than, what we're doing, right? I'm you could throw a dart at a list of breweries and the branding is probably going to be very similar and it's going to be
Right.
safe and it's going to appeal to the demo. And that's great. I have nothing against that. I think that needs to exist. And it's a very inherently smart way to do business is to try to appeal to a broad audience, right? But I think that what set made us unique is that we did not take that approach. And I think that that set us so far apart from the rest of the pack in terms of being a unique thing that it became identifiable. And I think that because we represented it authentically, even if people weren't necessarily into that, what they did appreciate was that A, it was different, and B, it was that level of authenticity, So I think that those things really made us stand apart from the rest of the, kind of homogeneity of the beer industry. And I think that led to a lot of our, commercial success and notoriety. I've always said that our reputation far, far went further than our actual distribution footprint, like we didn't make that much beer at the end of the year. At the end of probably last year, I think we may have made, 2,000 barrels, but we have this reputation of being this like massive thing. And that's always flummoxed me in a lot of ways of like, man, I wish that our production and our business size kind of matched that reputation in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I remember going in the first time and it was probably like a post GABF or, I was out there for something. So, dressed as John Hall for work with the blazer and bow tie and sitting at your bar.
Again,
And
authentic,
again,
authentically
yeah.
you.
But also like not feeling like, oh shit, like I'm gonna like I'm in the wrong place kind of thing. It's not like walking into the Dexter Lake Club. Like there is um, and I always admired that about the vibe that you all had set.
That that
Yeah,
is that's a metalhead thing, like I've said this a lot of times, I think, and I truly believe this, but you talk to a lot of folks who have met a good number of metalheads, and they will almost universally say like metalheads are some of the nicest people you'll meet because
100%.
we know we're weirdos, we know we're the oddballs, and we it just is like such a group of people who are outsiders that they understand what it means to be uncomfortable in a social setting and don't want that for other people. I think for the most part, like these folks are highly intelligent. They listen to complex music that has a lot of complicated imagery, a lot of complicated musicianship to it. A lot of complicated, in some stances, complicated viewpoints on certain topics, that some do or don't appreciate. I certainly don't in some cases, but I think it takes a lot of it's a thinking man's genre of music in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
It's not the ignorant thing that a lot of people make it out to be. Thinking persons, I should say. And I think that that just makes it so that these people, when they, I'm being very convoluted in this story, but I
No,
think at the
you
end of
got
the
time.
day, metalheads are incredibly friendly. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think that no one should ever judge someone who's just wearing a patched up vest or anything like that because it's probably going to be one of the nicer people you will encounter once you actually like break the ice with them and get through the some initial discomfort potentially.
Oh, agree, 100%. Um, when you talk about the reputation, though, and I'm probably guilty of this in the writing world as well. There was so much focus on the aesthetics, so much focus on the heavy metal brewery, and all of that. I don't remember talking about your beer all that much.
And that was a common, I feel like that was a
Like I remember
common.
going there and drinking. I remember you sending me bottles. I remember drinking it and enjoying it, but it's like almost like secondary. And I mean, that's a fault of mine. But I'm wondering if that was repeated.
Well, I think so. And I think that that's as a journalist, that's the unique thing, right? Like I was talking to someone recently about recipes, and they're like, well, what are you going to do with all these recipes? There must be some value to them or something like that. And I was like, no, there's no value to these fucking recipes. Like, it's everybody's IPA is the fucking same thing, like in this industry. It's one of the most frustrating parts about like the current
I'll clue
state
you
of
in. It's Citra and
affairs.
Mosaic. Yeah.
Yeah, no shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, guess what, guys? um, so I think I don't fault you or any other journalist for for having that approach because it was the thing that I think stood out the most, because at the end of the day, the ubiquity of the flavor profiles of these beers is such that it's probably just not even worth talking about when like we have something over here that is demonstrably like different and very like loud, no pun intended, in
Yeah.
terms of like something that's very visibly different and like makes for a good story or whatever. And the problem with that is that does a huge disservice to the immense amount of work that Zach did in our beer program. I think that our beer it is the thing that I will miss the most about this whole situation is like I love Zach's beer and the beer that he is producing now in Asheville is some of the best that he's produced in his entire career. And he should be so immensely proud of how far he has come in his brewing professional career because I think that it stands head and shoulders, above us. I believe that it stands head and shoulders above a lot of, what's out there in the world. And I always was bummed that we were always just the metal brewery. And it's always the thing was it's like, oh, it's this really cool vibe. It's this great place. Oh, and the beer's pretty good too, like it
Right.
was always kind of an afterthought. And that always I think I can't imagine the level of frustration that let impact, what that impact was on Zach and in his, thing. So I think he was always just, I think that was probably part of the motivation as well. That all being said, the people I think that appreciated what we did the most and the people, a group of people that appreciated what we did the most are brewers. I always said we were a brewers brewery and I stick by that. And I think that to have worked and collaborated with the breweries that we did, to have the respect of the breweries that I know we had the respect of. I think that that is, that's huge in a lot of ways for us. That speaks volumes. And I think to have that respect from industry people who are like, damn, they're making like you got to go to this place. If a brewer recommends a brewery to you, typically it's a good vote of confidence, right? So.
Oh, hands down. Yeah. So you mentioned the beer Zach's making in Asheville, and we didn't talk about this when you first opened up, the outpost or the second location, or moving states and states and states away from the home base. But what was the original Asheville thought for the brewery, and why did it make sense at the time?
I mean, obviously there's the base, like it's another huge beer city, right?
Right.
So there was that.
And you know how to operate in a beer city
Right.
and be your own thing
Yeah.
among dozens of others. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. A mentor of mine was, always said like, hey, if you can make it in Denver, you can probably make it anywhere. It's just the Colorado beer market is just so incredibly tough, whether it be from a distribution perspective, from a just operating in the state of Colorado, from a, just the nuts and bolts side of business thing. So I felt confident about that. And then you have other breweries here in town, like Burial and Dissolver, who are also, very left of center in their marketing and branding and whatnot. And I would sit at either of those breweries and see people at those breweries who I believe to be our demographic, So I was like, all right, the people exist here. The metal scene is not quite there. It's a very crunchy, granola town or whatever,
Yeah.
but it was getting tourism, people were visiting, and the people that were visiting or the people that lived here from the outside seemed like the people that would vibe with what we were doing. And anytime we would do a pop-up event at Burial or something like that, we had a lot of people fawning over, our beer and just that seemed really into it. So a lot of those went into the decision. And then on top of that, Erin, my wife, she was like employee like 3 or 4 at Wicked Weed, and then she was the head of brand for Burial for a significant amount of time. So,
Hmm.
she had a very good read on the market here, and felt very confident that this was going to be a good play for us in the long run. And I think between the economy, and now a natural disaster, I think
Sure.
we just kind of missed the party a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you guys open in relation to Helene?
It was like 6 months in or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd
And
had our
that's
first break even month, and then the hurricane hit and we were back to square one.
yeah. So when you cite again in this post, the brewery has run its course, and for a huge number of reasons, it's the right time to send this off into the lake, trailed by a fiery arrow. I like the Viking funeral thought there,
Motif.
but
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but I mean, it wasn't just this because you could say, okay, Asheville didn't work because of the economy um,
And
and
Denver's been doing no better,
okay.
to be honest. I think if anything, oh my God, how deep do you want to go into this?
Let's get
Because I
into it
could
because I
wax
think
for
yeah,
hours.
this is
I was your compatriot Josh Bernstein was in town not too long ago. He was out here on behest of Visit Asheville, writing some articles about the beer scene and just, hurricane recovery. What they just basically said, write whatever you want to write. And we got to talking, and one of the interesting things that I brought up to him was like, I really feel as though a big problem with why we are struggling in Denver is that our demographic has left the city. They've moved to the suburbs because they've started families, and they needed to find a good school network. They needed to find more space, whatever their, logic or decision-making process was. It drove them away from the city center and to the suburbs.
yeah,
And that's just that's natural. It's been happening for generations now or whatever, right? But those people cut their teeth on beer, right? So one of the things that I was always like flummoxed by was like, man, it seems like all these suburban breweries are just killing it. And I would talk to multiple breweries in the city of Denver, and they were all like, yeah, man, we're having a rough time right now. Like it is slow. We're just not seeing people. So I think that what is happening is you have this, suburban migration of craft beer aficionados, fans, whatever you want to call them, that just moved out to the suburbs for those reasons. And if I was doing something now, putting a brewery out in the suburbs seems like a much better play than putting one in an urban center for a variety of reasons. But it seems like the demo is there now, as opposed to being in the city center. And throw a dart and you hit an article about how the younger generation just isn't drinking beer or drinking at all for that matter, right? So I
sure.
think that these city center breweries around the country are just struggling because of a lot of those sorts of factors. And then, you know, um, it's incredibly expensive to do. One thing I do want to say is, a lot of people are pointing fingers at our landlord in Denver, and he has honestly been great. Like he has not raised our rent significantly. This is not a landlord based decision for for the Denver taproom location, thankfully. So, just to dispel any rumors or whatever about that, we
Sure.
actually had a good ally in that. And he believed in me when I had, a mediocre business plan 13 years ago or whatever. But it's not just like, oh, the rent's going up kind of thing. We have experienced that with our production facility out in Colorado, which we did have to close down. We did get a greedy landlord in that situation, but
Sure.
yeah, I think it really is just the migration of the fans of craft beer. I think they're just not living in the city center in the droves that they used to. So,
And there's something interesting to that as well. And the idea when you first opened that was in and around the beer space was this is a generational business. This is you are starting something that you will pass on to your descendants that like you're building these new dynasties. And you'd go to the conferences and you'd hear folks get up there and we're taking on the big guys and we're like legacy was thrown around a lot. And I think in some cases, you know, when you talk about, 28 to 41 now and everything that happens in life, it not only happened to you, but to the people who were the same age that walked in those doors for you. And that newer generation, even if they're into the same music, might be looking for, their own bar, their own place to hang out, because, maybe it's the old
Are you
man
saying
bar.
okay, boomer, basically?
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a natural lifespan to so many businesses. And right before we went on, I was like, I didn't want to say like how you doing because I figured, you're kind of bummed, but you have this levity to you. It almost feels like this is the right time for you to have made this decision.
Yeah, it feels
Like you're stopping before it gets sad.
that's I brought that up to our employees we did a kind of like an AMA with all of our staff. Obviously we're being that we're here in Asheville, it's incredibly difficult for me to like interface with all of our staff out there. So we wanted to give them the opportunity to we have always been open books with our employees. If you ask any of them, they'll say, we've never tried to hide anything. We've always been upfront. We've been honest. At least that's been our intention all along the way. So we wanted to make sure that they felt like they still had a continuity of that and had the ability to ask us questions about, why this is all happening. And I brought that up exactly. I was like, things, business, they know business is tough. They know that things are down considerably over, the heyday of 2019. And I cited that exact point. I was like, it's better for us to go out in this moment where we are on top and we have a good reputation instead of it being like, oh man, it's really fallen into disrepair because we just don't have the, capital or the, cash flow positivity to, continue to maintain the space or, do whatever, bring in product or whatnot. So I think ending on a high note is kind of it's kind of showing some grace for that. And I think that bringing up a natural lifespan to things, I think this is it. Like nothing lasts forever. Everything is ephemeral. So I think that for this to go out on a high note and recognize that like it wasn't going to be forever, but it may seem shorter to some than it could have been. I think that it's better than it dragging on in a discombobulated or state of just disrepair or something like that.
Yeah. Um, you're talking about missing the beer the most, from all of this, but as you
I shouldn't say that on
okay,
it's the people I will miss the
sure.
most. Like these are
Um,
I've made some of my best friends, and then but thankfully those come with me. Those
yeah.
don't go away. The bank, like I said in the post, like the bank can't seize those assets. And every year my wife and I will watch It's a Wonderful Life, and she always calls me George Bailey, and I think that the friends that I'm taking away from this are some of the best things that I have to the best payoff for all of it.
You kind of just answered this, but this is obviously a tough year in the American craft beer space. There's a lot of breweries closing. There's a lot of folks who are making the hard decisions, and some are being forced into it. Some are coming to the realization on their own and sort of controlling their own destiny, like it sounds like you're doing as well. But there are some folks who are still kind of holding on really tightly
Hmm.
when and I encounter these folks, right? And they're holding on really tightly because, for whatever reason. And in some cases it's like it's okay to let go. Like this isn't a failure. Like you built something, there's outside forces conspiring against you. But have you sort of come to any realizations or, since you've made this decision public of not necessarily doing it sooner, but just, you know, that freeing feeling, like if you had to talk to other brewer owners who, might be on the verge of their own realization on this, what do you tell them about once you round that corner?
There's life after beer kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
I mean, is there? Because like that's
yeah,
what
I
I'm
mean
terrified of.
yeah,
But yeah,
right. No, I mean so I think what you're getting at, and I think a lot of these people that are clutching so tightly to this industry have wrapped their identities up so immensely into beer. It's uh, it's tough, like if this has become if you thought that this was going to be the rest of your life's work, your métier for forever, and now all of a sudden this industry is kind of falling apart and the opportunities aren't there, and we've all been sold this lie of like we're all going to be able to retire on this thing or whatever. There's a lot of reasons to be scared about what's in store for the future for sure, and I think that identity crises are difficult, right? It's really hard to have your identity so tightly wrapped up in something that becomes something that isn't in vogue or appreciated as much as it used to be. So I think that's probably incredibly terrifying for a lot of people, and incredibly I don't know, it's just got to be incredibly tough. I know a lot of brewers that I'm friends with who have that situation of being so just tightly wound up into beer that I worry about what the future has for them if this trend continues. And I think that one of the things that I consider an asset through all of this is an immense lack of ego has helped me through this business like from start to finish, but it is certainly helping me in understanding what my life is going to look like beyond this. Erin has multiple times said that she's so worried about like what I am going to be as a person when True is not around anymore, and I'm actually okay with it. Like I just feel like I am not True and True is not me. And I have always tried to distance myself from the brand despite a lot of the voice of the brand being, kind of a refraction of my own voice. But I never identified this as me through and through. There's so much more to me as a person beyond just True. Like I'm into jazz, I'm into, electronic music, I am into working in my garden, like I do things outside of this, like I didn't make this every part of my being. And I think that has kind of armed me for what this looks like moving forward. I don't know. Does that answer your question? I
no,
don't
it does.
even.
It does, and I think that that's inspiring because I mean, I'm I'm thinking to myself, you should be a motivational speaker after this because, like all I know how to do is what I do,
Yeah.
and like I don't do anything else outside of this. So, when this ends,
You need a
uh,
hobby, buddy.
I don't I know it. I really do. We can talk about this later on. I don't want to bore people with my own insecurities and failures at life, but I know I like that, and I think that it's such a mature and rational approach to it, and you know the end is always the beginning of something new, and
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
and that's kind of fun. So, there is still time for folks to get into your places, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be open through this weekend. We'll close on the 12th. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, we are absolutely getting pillaged. So it is that's been the most that's been one of the most mixed feelings of the whole thing. Is it's kind of like where was Gondor when the Westfold fell kind of vibe, where it's just like, man, if people were coming in droves like this, we would be killing, we'd be going great. But I am fully understanding of the reality of why that is happening, right? Like
Sure.
people weren't coming because they don't. I think one of the things we're not recognizing about the industry is it's like, back in 2019, you would get let's say you have a group of four people come in, they're each having two, maybe even three beers and probably walking out with a couple of four packs. Now they come in, they have maybe beer and maybe a 10 ounce, and usually walk out empty handed, kind of thing. And that decline in taproom traffic, that moderation that people are exhibiting when they are out. I first of all, I respect that. I think it's not a bad thing for people to be drinking less, but it's going to have an impact on these businesses, right? So like there's going to be an atrophy within the industry just as a direct result of that, and that's okay. That's natural. And again, it's motivated by things that are I would not fault people for not being able to come in all the time. So even if I'm saying like, making my Lord of the Rings joke, uh, I'm not mad at anybody for the economic reality of not being able to actually come in, like 3 times a week and spending, like $60. It's just that reality has sailed. So, yeah, but anyway, going back to what I was saying, yeah, we should be open through this weekend, but we might very well run out of beer before then, so we'll just see what happens.
Well, I mean, in full disclosure, this isn't running until the 16th anyway. So,
Yeah, okay.
so you missed your chance,
We'll
folks, if
see
you
what
didn't get
happens.
there. Um, so I've been asking folks on the show for a while what I call the green door question. And there's this television show called The Good Place that in the final season introduces a concept of a green door. And the characters can walk through it and be anywhere they want, doing whatever they want. So if we had a green door on our plane of existence and this conversation ended and you could walk through it and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world,
Ooh,
where would you want to go?
I got to
Who
do
would you
it.
want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
That's okay. So I did get to do that recently. We were traveling to Decibel, Metal and Beer Fest in Philly,
Hmm.
and Aaron had just caught wind that Beer Street was going to be closing its original location, which, if anybody's not familiar, was probably one of my favorite beer bars I've ever been to. It's, in Brooklyn, and is run by one of my favorite, individuals I've ever met in this industry. Corey's just like one of the best dudes. And,
Hmm.
it was just like the perfect beer bar. The beer selection was always amazing. The vibe was so good. Um, and I just loved it. So, we got to go there for the final huzzah there, and seeing the look on on his face when we walked through the door was like, it was amazing. It was just one of the best experiences. And we started swapping some war stories about how things weren't going well and yada yada. And it was a good conversation to have in the moment when we were thinking this may this may be the moment that this has to go down, kind of thing. But I think if I could be anywhere in the world, I mean, there's so many things that I haven't had the opportunity to do yet because I've been so shackled to the brewery for so long.
Yeah.
I have got to see some amazing places. I've gotten to go to Copenhagen. I've gotten to go to the UK. So I've been fortunate to do some pretty cool travel as a result of the brewery. The two places I haven't been yet are Belgium and Germany. So I think, if we're talking from a beer perspective, where would I want to be? I think, going Oktoberfest would be so sick, like that would be something that I would love to check off the box. And, going to at least one Abbey brewery would be cool. I don't even know which one, but just having some of those experiences that kind of were like, I think back to my early career of like aspirational things. Those are two of them that I would like to be able to try to get to at some point. But the honest answer is, if I could be anywhere, it would be with Aaron on our honeymoon that we've been putting off for 5 years because of this brewery.
All of the things you're going to get to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and seriously, thanks for all the things that you did do.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
it was, um, from that journalistic standpoint, even with my own failures on that, like it was always cool to know that you all were out there and that left of center idea can work and can exist and can make, I think you used the word, homogenous, but like that there was something else out there aside from just some of that cookie cutter stuff.
Yeah.
And I hope other brewers future brewers look at you as a case study of you can be authentic, you can do cool things, and people will come, and it doesn't have to last forever. But
Yeah.
thanks for doing this. Thanks for chatting, Nick.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. It's good to catch up with you. And just as a parting note, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful to have been able to do this and to have been lucky enough to meet all of these people like yourself and to have brought this thing, kicking and screaming into the world and given a home to some real weirdos to, feel comfortable and feel safe and feel like they had a place to go. So I'm just so thankful for the whole experience, and I don't think I would change a thing. It's just really been a lovely time, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to what's next.
The craft beer world also lost a pioneer this week. Jack McAuliffe, the co-founder of New Albion Brewing in California, died at the age of 80. If you go to allaboutbeer.com, you can read the obituary. And when you're at allaboutbeer.com, check out other new content as well as our archives, which go all the way back to 1979. You can always reach me anytime on email at johnhall@allaboutbeer.com. And we're also on social media at allaboutbeer. Before we run, here is a word from this week's sponsor. StompStickers.com is loaded with features to make ordering a breeze. They save all your artwork and order history, so restocking your bestsellers is just a click away. Oh, and did we mention free shipping on every order? Try Stomp Stickers today and snag 15% off of your first order with the code FIRSTRUN.
Calling all hopheads. Dogfish Head's 60-minute IPA is a fantastically hoppy India Pale Ale that's beautifully balanced thanks to their unique continual hopping method. Delivering a pungent hop flavor that isn't crushingly bitter, 60 Minute is continually hopped throughout the boil for a full 60 minutes. Starting to see where the name comes from? Check out dogfish.com to learn more and to find some 60 Minute near you. Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, Milton, Delaware. Please drink responsibly.
If you're running a brewery, owner or operator, Beer 30 by the Fifth Ingredient is the ultimate command center. The most powerful brewery management software on the market, Beer 30 handles the entire brewing workflow from recipe development to production. Once your beer is brewed and ready, it seamlessly manages your inventory and streamlines your brewery's sales and distribution, all in the same easy-to-use platform. Beer 30 lets you get back to the beer and to the people that made you fall in love with this industry in the first place. And no other brewery management software gives you the ability to truly master your business and get the insights that you need to thrive in an increasingly competitive industry. Visit thefifthingredient.com/allaboutbeer today to learn more and receive 3 free months of Beer 30. If you like beer audio content, go check out the All About Beer podcast channel. You can listen to the All About Beer podcast with Don Tess and M. Souter, or the Brewer to Brewer podcast, which is brewers interviewing brewers. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday. The BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And as for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.